News updates. The conflict between Yemen's Houthis and the US has intensified following a series of US airstrikes on Houthi positions. In response, Houthi rebels have claimed another attack on a United States naval vessel, calling it retaliation for US strikes on Yemen. A Houthi spokesperson said that the fighters had launched 18 missiles and a drone at the aircraft carrier USS Harry Truman and its accompanying warships. Updating an earlier death toll, Houthi Health Ministry spokesperson Anis al-Bahi posted on X that 53 people had been killed, including 5 children and 2 women, and that 98 people had been wounded. The US insists it will target Houthis until Yemeni group withdraws threat to Red Sea shipping. We are once again joined by Dr. Veselin Ivanov-Popovsky, Professor and Vice Dean of Jindal Global Law School. Thank you very much for once again joining us. Going into these strikes from the Americans on the Houthis, what are the primary strategic goals from the United States in these airstrikes?
Well, certainly, Houthis are one of the worst terrorist organizations in the world, and it's a long strategy. It's not something that Donald Trump came up with yesterday. This is a long-term American foreign policy, counter-terrorism in many parts of the world. And it is kind of a continuation of what the previous administration did in limited strikes against Houthis, including, which, by the way, can a little bit go against what Donald Trump used to say. I'm the peacemaker, I'm the person who never started any war. There will be question marks, but we know Trump. Trump is usually making those statements that have nothing in common with what he said yesterday and what he will say tomorrow. So those change of minds in Trump's mind are very often. But I would be very hopeful to see United States continuing commitments to counter-terrorist operations from the previous Joe Biden. So I'm very happy to see that commitments to global order, including in counterterrorism, continues. Obviously, this needs to be very specific and very limited, with sparing civilian lives, obviously, and not random and not producing extreme collateral damage.
Yes, Dr. Veselin, you called the Houthis then one of the worst terrorist organizations. Why are you calling them this?
Well, not me. It is United Nations in many resolutions, many statements made by the majority of the world leaders. They are fighting in a war which is totally illegal, supported by Iran, by the way. It's the kind of the Iranian proxies, and these also include Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, and other actors, non-state actors, that are considered to fight. Terrorism means indiscriminate fighting, not sparing any civilian lives, and that's how Houthi fight all over. There are plenty of evidence. It's not my judgment. It's a very global judgment. Houthis do fight indiscriminately, killing a lot of civilians.
Yes, I wanted to go on now. Obviously, you mentioned the civilian impact. There's been reports of women dying in these strikes by the US, children as well. How can the US reconcile the need to neutralize these Houthi threats, but with the moral imperative to minimize civilian impact and casualties?
Well, they should. I regret to see any civilian dead, and for that matter, I also would blame the US military that were not taking precautionary measures to limit to a minimum civilian life. So those strikes against terrorists should also be very specific and very careful as not to result in civilian lives, and that also would damage such action, counter-terrorist actions, if they produce excessive damage. Absolutely, I'm supporting the view that US military should be blamed if strikes on Houthis produce excessive civilian damage.
Yes, the Houthis have claimed to have attacked the USS Harry S. Truman on 2 occasions. What does this say about the group's military capabilities, and how might this change US calculations in that regard?
Yes, that's a dangerous, I would say, support from Iran comes often to Houthis, and for that matter, they have the capabilities to exercise those strikes, including on targets such as the US Navy. And for that matter, again, some pressure is necessary to exercise also on Iran to stop supporting its proxies, such as Houthis, such as Hezbollah, and such as Hamas. Definitely pressure on Iran, including diplomatic, economic sanctions, including, as we see now, sometimes necessary proportionate military strikes.
Given the strategic importance of the Red Sea for global shipping, how might these continued hostilities affect maritime security and global trade routes?
Well, that's also part of Houthis tactics. All terrorists would love to see distractions and disruptions of transportations, of shipments, and control over the Red Sea is important to ensure, as you said correctly, the international trade rules and exports and imports from all countries. And many countries in the region are very affected by the fight between Houthis and the government of Yemen, including the support for the government of other international players. So the Red Sea is an important transportation route, and as soon as the conflict is mitigated and hopefully solved, that will be better for the region, better for the world.
Dr. Veselin, are there going to be any diplomatic initiatives to help de-escalate this conflict? And how do you think the US airstrikes impact potential avenues for negotiation, if any, with the Houthis?
Certainly, we don't see much diplomacy. I fully agree with the kind of the spirit of the question. We need to see more United Nations here, and I'm teaching United Nations studies, and I'm very disappointed, by the way, to see no action whatsoever coming from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, or any other parts of the United Nations on any of those discussions. For example, we earlier discussed the ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, and obviously United Nations would be the best organization to offer the monitoring of the contact line and on any demilitarized zone in the future. And the same in Gaza. There are a lot of talks about who should reconstruct Gaza. Would that be Donald Trump? Would that be some Arab countries? Again, where is United Nations? United Nations used to offer those services many times in the past, in Cambodia, in Timor-Leste, in Sierra Leone, in Yugoslavia, and in many other parts of the world. Where is, I'm asking, United Nations to offer its good services exactly for the situations which they did so many times in the past in terms of peacekeeping, in terms of monitoring, ceasefire, and so on.
Thank you very much for joining us.